Many of you know Nitzan Haroz, who needs no introduction, principal trombone of the Philadelphia Orchestra. But one of the things I mentioned on the flyer was that Nitzan is a trombone soloist and has had a very vibrant career of performing as a solo and chamber artist. And Nitzan and I had the pleasure of talking with him a little bit before the session. And one of the things that he mentioned to me was that throughout his development as a player and an artist, world domination via major symphony orchestras was not in his scope. That was not the direction that he was necessarily heading. And I think that it's interesting, maybe Nitzan, if you might want to start by just talking a little bit about what you were, thinking about and how you did get started. I think that would be really interesting for us to kind of maybe dive in with.
So first of all, good morning, everyone. If there's anyone who's in Europe or somewhere far like this, then good afternoon, but I don't think so for now, right? Anyway, so good morning, maybe two, yeah. So thank you, Jason, very much for the introduction and also for initiating this, for reaching out to me and getting in touch. And thank you, Dave, also for being part of this. Really appreciate it. When Jason and I first talked, he was explaining a little bit about the format of what these sessions usually are. And I expressed, first of all, great interest in doing this. However, I asked Jason if it's okay if we don't do yet another warm-up session. I could see that you've had quite a few fantastic trombonists whom you shared a warm up with, and I felt that maybe we can do something a little different. So he was kind enough to agree to that, and so yeah, we talked about perhaps topics that we can discuss and talk about. So yeah, indeed, it is very true that when Jason and I talked, we started to talk about my past and my path. And one of the things I mentioned indeed was that I never really thought that this is where I was going to end up. This is where I'm heading. And the reason I said it, or the reason I'm saying it now, has a lot to do with the difference in my path to a lot of my students and people I see, especially in this country, I have to say, especially in the US, where young students at a fairly young age tune into and become focused towards winning a job. And perhaps it's even okay to say, getting obsessed with getting a job at as early as possible, as quickly as possible. And in the process of becoming so focused towards that, they in a way narrow their focus towards orchestral playing or trombone orchestral playing, working very hard on orchestral excerpts, and then starting relatively early to work very hard towards preparing for auditions, and then start the journey of taking auditions, sometimes fairly early, and do that for a while until hopefully they either get a job or they give up and do something else. My path was very different, and I think perhaps it's worth talking about a little bit if you're interested, because I think that the fact that I was free of these thoughts, free of these plans, helped me shape who I was musically who I am musically now, and develop a more soloistic approach on the trombone, which at the end I think contributed to my playing and helped me be where I am right now. I was born in Israel, a very southernmost city in Israel by the Red Sea. And I was born to a fairly musical family. On my mother's side, basically everyone on her, every one of her siblings, she was one of 7. Every one of her siblings played an instrument. And my mother is a harpist, still to this day, playing, performing mostly chamber music. And she also played and plays the piano. So I think I was very fortunate to be born into this cradle, this musical basket. You know, as a baby already, I heard, you know, the sounds of the harp and the piano, and my father is not a musician, but he loves music, so he listens a lot to different styles of music. So that immediately was a big part of my upbringing and background, is being surrounded with music. And at the age of 9, I saw a picture of the trombone in a brochure somewhere where we were visiting, myself and my parents, and I pointed at the trombone to my mother and I said, "This is what I want to play." And she says, "Oh, really? Okay." So for a musician, I mean, she appreciated that it came from me and not from them, and she went ahead and found a teacher, and then I started to take lessons. My first teacher was Eli Aaroni. He's a bass trombonist with the Jerusalem Symphony. And I studied with him for about 8 years until I moved on to Mitchell Ross, who unfortunately is not with us anymore. But Mitchell Ross was the principal trombone of the San Francisco Ballet Orchestra. When Joe Alessi was, I think, 15 years old, 14, 15 years old, he studied with Mitch in the San Francisco area for a couple of years. So there's a little bit of a link there. Mitchell Ross was also, it's interesting to point out, was a student of Arnold Jacobs for a while. So he was obviously also a very big influence on me. And yeah, so I'm moving along here. I guess I wanted to speak a little bit about what made me what I am. When I think back, I realized that when I was 13 years old, or before I became 13 years old, I started working towards my bar mitzvah. Most of you probably know what that means. The Jewish should I say ritual or ceremony?
Perhaps a rite of passage.
Rite of passage, beautiful. Thank you, Jason. Where on that day you're supposed to read a certain part of the certain section from the one of the books in the Old Testament in synagogue, and perhaps be part of the prayer, and it obviously, you know, symbolizes you becoming this passage to adulthood and being responsible for yourself and taking control of your own life, which also includes you know, doing things towards, you know, our creator, if you will. But traditionally, during that ceremony in synagogue, you have to actually not just read the text, but you sing it, because if you've ever been to a synagogue on Shabbat, actually today is Shabbat, Saturday, Sabbath. What we do there is we always read a certain section, and every week we continue where we left off until we finish the 5 books of the Old Testament, and then we start all over again. So when you read that section, it's sung in a certain way, or with certain notation. There are these signs, little signs that are written under and above the Hebrew words, and they represent a certain melodic line, or it's almost like notes, and you learn how to sing these signs. How to read the text and sing at the same time according to these signs. It's actually pretty cool. And depending on where you're from, where your background is from, the melodic lines vary. My background is, from my father's side, they came from Germany, a certain area in Germany, barely made it. My grandfather was already in a concentration camp, and was going to be sent to a death camp, but was able to escape at the very last minute, and moved to Israel, what was Palestine back then. Yes, but he grew up around Berlin, and he came from the tradition of the Germanic and European music. My mother's side, incidentally, was more from Hungary and Russia. But so when I was about 12, or in my 12th year, I started to learn how to sing these melodic lines and signs, and it wasn't until recently, I have to say, that it came to my realization that part of my musical self, and part of understanding how to project sound, how to create sound, tonality, all of that started there, because my grandfather had a background of choir, a director back in Germany, and sang himself and was a cantor in synagogue. And he worked very hard with me. I was a very shy little boy, like boys usually are. I spoke like this, and and he insisted that I learn how to open my mouth when I speak, when I read the text, that I say it clearly, that the diction is clear, and that the sound of my voice will carry and be present enough in the synagogue, which wasn't incidentally a huge American or European style synagogue. It was somewhere in Jerusalem, small synagogue, but it didn't matter. My mother was all the way in the back, because this was an Orthodox synagogue where the men and women are separated. So my mother was going to be in the back, and my grandfather kept saying, "I want your mother to hear every word that you're pronouncing in this ceremony. I want her to be proud of you. Open your mouth, sing." And we worked on that, and that was, I think, the beginning of my understanding and the connection between making good sound, also on the trombone, projecting, understanding the importance of tone, quality and pronunciation in general. So yeah, that was when I was 13. Later on, I started to play with a youth orchestra when I was in my when I was about 17. I joined the army. It's not true. I'm sorry. I actually started to play with a youth orchestra much earlier on, when I was 11. But yeah, when I was 18, I joined the army for 3 years. It's mandatory in Israel, but I was lucky enough. Again, my father pushed me to join the military band, which I wasn't very excited about, incidentally, showing also how not focused I was towards becoming a professional musician. I just wasn't sure at 18 that this is what I wanted to be, even though I was pretty advanced in my trombone playing. But I thought I wanted to be to serve in the military, like a lot of my friends, to serve in a real military unit, and perhaps even a advanced, like special unit kind of thing, special forces. That was where I thought I wanted to be and wanted to do, serve the country, all that. My father, who had the opposite of pleasure of participating in a couple of wars in Israel, the 6-Day War and Yom Kippur War, when I was a baby, knew very much that this was not, a Hollywood movie, and that these things are very serious and at times very tragic, or always. I mean, wars are always tragic. So he said, I really do believe that if the Israeli army can afford to have a band, I don't see why my son cannot be part of it. And he said, you have a profession in your hand. Why don't you at least try for it? And I did. I listened to him like a good boy. And once I got in, I just went with it and did 3 years of a military band type service, and then immediately I went into winning a job with an orchestra in Israel. Somehow it happened, again, it wasn't because that's where I wanted to be. It just an opening became available at an orchestra. It's an opera, symphonic opera orchestra near Tel Aviv in Israel, and I tried my luck. I won. I started to play there, and then after a couple of years, I came here to the US and took a few auditions for different schools and got into Juilliard. Went back to Israel, talked to my old teacher, Mitchell Ross, and asked for his opinion. And he said, go study with Joe, because he's like a rising star, and that's going to be good for you. So that's what happened. And very quickly, when I started with Joe, actually my first lesson with him in Juilliard, he asked if I'm aware of the audition that they have with the New York Philharmonic, and I said, well, yeah, I actually am aware of it. And he said, yeah, let's work towards it. And 6 months later, I was very fortunate to win that job. So this was okay. So I'll just continue that 2 years later, the Philadelphia Orchestra had an opening, and I took that audition and was fortunate enough to win it as well. Yeah. So this is, in short, where. Just the story very, very quickly. I guess I didn't really talk much about the fact that when I was in my teens, Uh, I had an accompanist at home, so to speak. Realized that I forgot to tell my mother about this session. She would have loved to be here. And
Oh,
Louis
that's
would
too
have been
bad.
happy to
Yeah.
have her here.
She's not on
Yeah,
our list yet.
yeah.
To get her on.
But if you're recording this, I mean, at some point, she might actually tune in and listen. But, you
It,
know,
if I
sorry.
may interject, I just have one question,
Yes,
and I feel
Jason.
like it's a cliffhanger for me right now. All right, back to the bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
How did it go? Like, did you feel like you did well? Do you feel like you projected? Did your mom hear every word? Like, was this a positive experience? And the reason I ask is because I feel like at that age, if we have a significantly positive or a significantly negative experience, it can really make a profound impact on the trajectory of how we then view the world and live our lives. And so I can't help but imagine that it went pretty well, and that really had a positive shape on your, interest and curiosity and performance, and filling the hall, so to speak.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much for helping me here and refocusing me towards important aspects. Yes, I do believe I'm far enough in my life from that point to be able to say yes. It was an enormous success, as a matter of fact. Maybe I didn't necessarily recognize it as such back then. But it was. Of course, it wasn't a performance with my trombone, but it was very much a performance, because it was indeed, I think, my first and one of my important performances around that age, definitely. What came to my mind when you asked the question, when you talked about it, is the level of preparation. Again, thanks to my grandfather, who, again, because of his background coming from Germany and being, very strict and very, in a way, square. I don't know if that's fair to say, but an amazing human being, really an incredible man that I loved so much. But he insisted on having weekly practice sessions with me. I mean, he started early on. He worked with me tirelessly on small elements of my, the reading, the actual reading, the technical aspects of reading and learning the music and learning the notations, and then the aspect of production, sound production, and all of that. And we worked for months towards this. The level of preparation was perhaps as high as my level of preparing to take the audition with New York Philharmonic or Philadelphia Orchestra. It was that thorough and complete work, where one thing is I had to learn a pretty significant length of a text, and when you read in the Torah, in the Old Testament, you read off of a leather scroll, right? You say scroll. I mean, the text is written on leather, on calf skin, or cow skin, or something like that, and it's written in a way that if you didn't, it's almost like you read Shakespeare with special calligraphy, that without the proper training, you would look at the letters and you wouldn't necessarily recognize and understand what you're reading. It's pretty far from the modern Hebrew that we speak. So you need to, I mean, there are all these aspects. You need to learn how to read this text. You need to learn how sing those signs, which are not there when you read the actual text, because the text is written in the most pure form. There are no dots or notes or anything. So Hebrew is written with certain dots or notations, So instead of vowels, there are all these notations on the words that you read in a book, let's say, that help you read the word. Otherwise, it could be understood as perhaps another word. Some words are written the same way, but just the notation is a little different. So you have to learn all of these things by memory, because nothing is there in the text except for the actual letters. And again, as I said, the calligraphy, if you will, is such that even that makes it a challenge. So my preparation had to be so thorough, and it really definitely helped. And that's also something that could be good for all of us, because one thing I sometimes experience is that students of mine will come and say, "Oh, we just saw in the international musician that there's an audition in Oklahoma, Philharmonic, whatever. It's in 2 months, and it's Principal Trombone want to take it." So, and sometimes it could be even a significant job. However, there's not a lot of time to prepare, and I always stop them and say, well, first of all, here's something to think about. Do you want to live in this place? Okay, if it's New York, if it's Chicago, it's a no-brainer. But I mean, if it's some city somewhere in, do you want to live there? I mean, if you want the job, would you want to actually move there and play? I mean, did you think about it? Oh, no, I just thought I would take the audition as to practice. Practice what? Practice not winning? I mean, what kind of experience are we talking about here? So one aspect is like, do you actually want to work in this place? Do you want to work with that orchestra? And secondly, do you think you have enough time to prepare for this? Because if you can't prepare 100%, 200%, and be over-prepared almost, there's basically no point on you going and wasting the time of the committee hearing you play the audition.
It's Sam.
Yes.
This is Martin.
Hello, Martin.
I just wanted to pipe up high. I live in Toronto, and we have a large Jewish community here, and I was invited to a bar mitzvah once. I'm Christian, but what you're saying is quite true and quite reflective. You have a young boy becoming a man at the age of 13 who has to take part of the Torah, and among friends interpret that for the audience. The audience is very supportive. They want him to succeed, but with the preparation work you're doing, there's absolutely no difference preparing for a bar mitzvah than there is for an audition. In my professional life, I work in a large system database. I'm constantly doing industry presentations, and that helps me prepare to play solos in front of the band I play with. And they're all tied together, but that supportive role that your grandfather and your father helping you prepare for your bar mitzvah was really getting you ready to perform trombone and other things in your life. And that's quite insightful. I hadn't really thought of that before.
Absolutely. Thank you, Martin. Thank you so much for that. The preparation was so strict and so planned in a way. Also, as we're talking about this, as Martin said, what he did just now made me also think and remember that part of the preparation was mimicking the actual service. So basically, it started with learning everything I mentioned earlier, and then at some point, I was able to read the whole thing. So my grandfather had me stand, which is what I was going to do in the synagogue, not sit, stand and read the whole thing. The next thing was to read from a book which mimics the actual Torah scroll, so it has no punctuations and none of the signs that help you remember. And you read off of that first in small chunks, and then the whole thing. And the next stage was to actually physically take me to a synagogue. I'm not sure that I was able to get to the synagogue where the sermon was happening, but to a synagogue, to a space where I felt suddenly my heartbeat racing, because I felt like, here it is. This is how it's going to be, and read off of a real Torah, a real script, and mimic the whole thing. Put the talit, which is this piece of cloth that we also put on, traditional part of the clothing, and mimic the whole thing, and get through the motions of doing it. Just to finish, Jason. So because of this a long process of preparation, I think at the end it was a big success. I mean, I know that people from the synagogue came to me afterwards and they said, we never heard anything like that. And I also read the entire section, which is it's like a 20-minute, 15-20 minutes long section. So you can imagine how much text there is, how much there is to learn by heart, by memory, all the signs and the text. And then I was approached by the synagogue, what should I call him, the president, whatever, the one of the people who was responsible in finding young people to read this text every Saturday, and he asked me to do this again and again, and I did it a number of times before I retired into the army and doing other things and so on. So yes, it was a very, very successful experience. I wanted to say that in talking about audition preparations or preparation towards anything that's really important, it could be a recital, it could be a concerto appearance, or anything like that. I encourage my students and anyone I talk to about this to, first of all, to prepare in advance as much as possible, to be very organized about the preparation, meaning never to neglect any aspect of if it's an audition, if let's say 10 excerpts, not to neglect any of the excerpts. So they're all very high level of preparation. If it's a concerto, if it's a recital, to work and make sure that everything is very well prepared, and then to find ways, indeed, to mimic, to have either mock auditions, to gather friends, colleagues, who would be designated listeners or designated committee, if you will. When I was in Juilliard, and I was preparing for the New York Philharmonic, I gathered about maybe 6 or 7 friends. A couple of them were brass players, but the rest were not, which I also think is important. There were some string players there. There were some woodwind players there. I found a desk and put them behind a desk with chairs. I gave them photocopies of the music, of the excerpts. I gave them pieces of paper and pencils. I asked them to write down everything they thought I should do differently. I even was able to improvise a certain screen, to put a screen so they weren't able to see me and I wasn't able to see them. And let me tell you, I was so nervous doing that. And I did it, I think, at least twice. I was so nervous, but it was very good. It was basically what my grandfather did when I was 13. I was sorry, Jason.
Pardon me. I was just going to say it's really interesting because Denson Paul Pollard did a section with us. Everything feels like 3 years ago during this COVID time, but at some point he did a session, and one of the things he said was he used the expression of, like the face only a mother can love. He referred to a sound that only trombonists can love, and he said that it's just so important to get yourself in front of non-trombonists and non-brass players and other musicians because they listen to what we do in a very different way. And I imagine, growing up with your mom as a harpist and other musicians, and the trombone being not the black sheep of the family, but like, you didn't grow up in a family of trombonists. Joe Alessi grew up in a family of brass players.
That's true.
Not everyone, but many of them, his father and his grandfather and all that. But you were surrounded by musicians, not necessarily trombonists. And I do think that makes a lot of sense when you think about, Nitzan, the artist, and how you approach your career as a musician and artist. It kind of makes perfect sense, really. But I thought that it was interesting that you and Denson were saying essentially the same thing in a very similar way.
Yeah, very true. Very true. It's very important to remember that if you're lucky, a lot of your audience or a big part or a part of the audience that's going to listen to you are not necessarily trombone players, and they don't necessarily understand the challenges that we have playing the trombone. They don't really care necessarily that a certain passage is difficult. They just want to hear music. They want to hear beautiful music. And so in a way, there was a certain advantage. Having a mother who is a harpist, there are definitely another set of challenges for a harp player to deal with 7 pedals and 47 strings or something like that. Technically it's a difficult instrument as well. But when I played something and I interrupted the phrase with a breath, she said, "Well, no, don't breathe there." No, but Mom, I have to breathe. Well, then breathe somewhere else, because that's you're ruining the phrase here. A similar thing happened to me later when I was preparing for a certain recital, and I played something for my uncle, my mother's brother, who was for many, many years the principal cellist of the Israel Philharmonic. So, cello happens to, be one of my favorite instruments. It's like such a beautiful, beautiful instrument, great tone, and it's so close, and in a way, it's such a close relative, at least range-wise, to the trombone. And I was playing a Baroque piece, and he was listening, and he said, "Yeah, but here, you should do this or that," and talking about a technical passage and asking that I lead a certain way, and that I do something that for me seemed extremely challenging at the time. And my first reaction was, I don't think I can do that. I mean, that's, almost impossible on the trombone. And I wasn't impressed by that. He said, "Well, do it, because it's, that's where the music that's where the music wants to be, and that's the emphasis, and that's where you need to be here in this phrase, and it kind of forced me to look look outside the box and to search ways to give the music the highest importance and not give in to technical hardships and challenges of the instrument, not take it as an excuse.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned that your mother and all of her siblings played musical instruments. What other musical instruments were around? So you've mentioned harp and cello. What other things were going around?
Well, first of all, my mother's dad, so my grandfather, I never met him. Unfortunately, he was killed. That's the harsh reality of Israel. My grandfather, my mother's father, was killed when my mother was 3 years old. She had one more sister who was a year and a half. So my grandmother was left with 7 kids, if you can even fathom that. I can't. But they were left without a father. He was actually a member of the police band early on at the beginning of the state of Israel, when Israel became a state. And he was a musician. He was a flute player. He also played other instruments, but flute was his main instrument. And he played with a police band as a police officer. He also had to do some guarding. I mean, he had to guard a certain area just to stand there. And he was killed doing that, and by a Jordanian soldier who threw a grenade or something. That was the end of that. So, but that was him. Unfortunately, I didn't get to hear him physically play, but his presence was always talked about. And the other instruments that my mother's sibling played were violin, viola, piano. So there were like 2 violinists, 1 violist, piano, cello, harp. If I'm missing something, there was maybe another pianist want to be. Not all of them became professional musicians. They all played, but they were not all professional musicians. There were only 3 of them that became very serious in music, and a couple others who were like amateur musicians. So
it's interesting though, all the string instruments, piano, woodwind. I mean, again, this is all kind of making sense. Personally, I feel like when you play it's almost like the least significant aspect of what you do is the trombone you're holding. There are some other fantastic trombone operators, and they sound amazing on trombone, but the trombone is a very big part of what they bring to the table. And I feel like you have a level of artistry that kind of transcends maybe beyond the trombone. And I don't mean to sound like the trombone is, should be considered like a lower class of instrument. I think sometimes people may view or talk about the trombone as if it's like a second-class citizen in the musical family, like, harps and violins and pianos are up here and voices up here and flutes up here, and then somewhere down by the bagpipes is, kind of where trombone lives or something like that. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I think your influences have obviously shaped you in a way that kind of transcends beyond the trombone. And I think that's highly evident in your solo recordings and music that you've kind of put out there. So I just wanted to
thank you. Thank you very much, Jason. I appreciate it. I don't know what to say, except that, again, going back to the days where I learned how to open my mouth and sing, during the bar mitzvah. Incidentally, also as a family, we growing in a religious family. I mean, when I say religious, you have to understand it's not like Hasidic religious in any way, that like ultra Orthodox, but modern Orthodox. We would observe Shabbat, the Shabbat rules, which basically mean, in general, no work, not working. I didn't write on Shabbat. I didn't play the trombone on Shabbat. I didn't listen to music on Shabbat. I didn't watch TV or listen to the radio. I didn't ride my bike. I didn't drive a car. Truly a day of rest that starts on the sunset, on Friday, and ends on Saturday, Shabbat, when there are about 3 stars visible in the sky. So 25 hours later, 25 hours every week where you take time away from all those modern activities, such trombone playing, listening to music. There's nothing wrong with that, obviously, but riding, driving, it enforces you to do other valuable things. Back then, we didn't have internet. When I was in my teens, there was no internet, there were no cell phones, there was nothing like that to distract you anyway. If there was, it would also be a break from that, which, we all know in a way it's not a bad thing. I don't know the last time I took, besides when I'm sleeping, of course, that happens every now and then. But when I don't sleep, I can't think of the last time I took, 2 hours even straight without looking at my phone or a screen of some sort. But imagine, 25 hours or so of just relaxed, reading a book, reading newspaper, going to synagogue, singing, chanting with a group of people. When we used to eat, Friday night was a festive meal, and Saturday afternoon was a festive lunch. There are these blessings before you start eating, and then after you thank whomever you thank for the food, and all of that is done with a lot of singing. Living and having the being fortunate to be in a musical family, we also, when we sang a lot of these songs at the end of meals, we would harmonize. I learned just by ear to harmonize and sing second voice and sometimes the bass underneath the melody when I developed a slightly lower voice. And all of this kind of contributed to my musical soul. There was a lot of singing, and I think if there's something I can say, I'm one of those like Charlie Vernon and Denson Pollard and many others who will talk forever about the connection between trombone playing and singing, and finding your singing voice when you play the trombone. And it doesn't matter what style you play, the connection. I listened to a lot of singers also growing up. That was something that my father introduced, all kinds of, choir works. There was a period of a few years where my father was obsessed with listening to requiems for whatever reason. He just wanted to hear. So we heard, the Berlioz Requiem and the Fauré Requiems and Brahms Requiem and Britten Requiem and all these works that are at times, the pinnacle work of a composer. If they're lucky enough to get to that point and write a requiem, it was a lot of times very, very, very meaningful for these composers. And it seemed to have been, for a lot of them, the greatest, perhaps one of the greatest works that they ever composed. So we listened to a lot of these things at home, It was an injection of vocal music that definitely transcended and turned me into what I am today in my playing. It's important to also mention, and I may play you a couple of things. I don't think there are enough or any recordings of mine yet out there with my mother, which is unfortunate. We have recorded a few things. Louis is smiling, but we talked a lot about that in the past. Yes, learning how to play with piano at an early age, it was very simple in a way. My mother said, "Look, I mean, okay, so let me take this back a little bit, because I mentioned earlier that I grew up in a house where I had an accompanist, living accompanist. How fortunate was I to have a mother who plays the piano as well as she does, besides the harp. And when I was young and I started to play some real music on the trombone, I would very quickly take the piano part and go to my mom and say, "Mom, can you please accompany me?" Because I realized how much more colorful it was to play whatever I played, having the accompaniment right there, to have the -1 accompaniment right there at will. It was fantastic. So I remember two things very clearly. One is my mom said at times, "Well, why don't you learn the solo part a little bit better before you have me come in and accompany you while you miss notes and play wrong accidentals and struggle through technical passages. Just learn the piece a little bit better, and then I'll accompany you." Okay, so that was one thing. The other thing is when at some point, I think it was probably her idea to play together with a harp, to play the trombone together with the harp. However, she said, "It is very important for you to learn how to play softly, because if you can't play softly well, there's really no point in us playing together with me playing the harp. You're just going to obliterate my sound, and there's no point." So that was a key element in working on sensitivity and playing on playing softly, learning how to play softly. And I'm sure many of you have heard from other players, perhaps other orchestral players, that one of the most challenging things in the orchestra is to play softly, because there's nothing more challenging than to sit, for three tutset movements where you do nothing, and you forgot about your warm-up hours ago, and you're sitting on stage trying to stay focused, and then you come in on a soft high A, and if you're playing first trombone in Brahms's first symphony, for instance, or in the fourth symphony of Brahms, where again you sit for three movements doing absolutely nothing, and then you have to play the most gorgeous chorale in the fourth movement, softly, of course. So if you don't feel comfortable, if you're not comfortable producing the most gorgeous sound playing softly, then you should work on that, because it's an important aspect. And talking also about non-trombonists listening to trombone players, I'll tell you, there's nothing that people like more than hearing a trombone player being able to play musically softly. I mean, people are usually more impressed at that than they are with any other aspect of our wonderful instrument. When you play loud, when you play fast, all these things can be impressive, but when you play softly, and you have good control, that that can be very impressive. And it's very impressive for conductors. They don't take it for granted. You know, we orchestral trombone players are used to seeing this a lot, because conductors, especially old school European conductors, which I've had a couple music directors, one in New York and one in Philadelphia. Too much. Well, but I've been sitting for 3 movements doing nothing. Let me play something, for God's sakes. All right, so let me share some things with you.
I was just going to ask. Yeah, we had talked a little bit, and you said you might have some recordings that you could maybe demonstrate some of some of this.
Yes, share sound. Okay, I would be very, very happy to answer at any point any questions. Please feel free to ask anything. It could be completely non-related to what I talked about so far in regards to my orchestral playing, my solo playing, whatever. Please feel free to do that. Also, I will say now that if anyone is interested in reaching out the way that Jason did after the session, the ITA New York Philharmonic reunion session. After that, Jason reached out to me and we got connected that way. Feel free to reach out to me at a later time if you're interested in hearing something or talking about something else or asking any questions. This is one of the advantages of this weird time that we're in, the pandemic. I have a lot of time on my hands. So maybe just a few examples. We can start with a Bonsoir, Debussy Bonsoir, something I recorded with my mother many years ago. Some of you may have heard Joe Alessi playing it. He recorded it after I played this recording for him during the time I was with the New York Philharmonic. So this is my mother and I. Okay. You can't hear?
No, we don't hear it on our end. Did you share your sound?
I think I did. Oh, maybe I clicked off. I'm so sorry. Please, I apologize.
I mean, I knew your soft playing was amazing, but that's ridiculous.
I haven't even started playing. It was my mom, but yes, thank you. And here we go again. Bonsoir. That's the bonsoir. Let's hear one more thing with harp. You were going to say something, Jason?
Just beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. I hope you can all hear okay. I mean, here I am sitting with my fancy Sony professional earphones. I hope it sounds okay to all of you. This is a movement from a piece by an Israeli composer, what my mother did, which was really wonderful, is she started to talk to composers, mainly in Israel, and interest them in writing for trombone and harp, because there wasn't really anything that we could find back then for trombone and harp. So we did a lot of transcriptions. I mean, I basically played off of either Keith Brown type sonata arrangement or play off of a cello part. We did a lot of these Baroque sonatas, Vivaldi, Marcello, Galliard, Handel, a lot of these things, because they also work very, very well with harp. But my mother spoke to a few composers. Some of them were brave enough to write for us. This composer is Gideon Levinson. He wrote a piece called 4 Songs Without Words, and this is one of the movements. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not it. That's actually Tessorini. I was gonna maybe play that as well. Let's see, what's that? No, that's a Tessorini. Okay, I should mark these things, don't you think? Yeah, it was interesting to work on some of these compositions. Helped me also be a little bit more open to avant-garde music. Some of these composers were actually interested in emphasizing the sometimes shocking difference between the harp, the magical harp, and the trombone with its power and
You know, it's amazing though, because I feel like there's such a timbral difference that there are moments where you're really bringing quite a bit of emotion in the sound and the volume, and yet I still hear the harp and it's fine. You know, it's almost like they're two completely different timbral qualities, so they don't get in each other's way in the same sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, it's always been a challenge. Certainly, playing live on different stages, we always try to find the right placement of the instruments so the harp can project as much as possible. My mother wasn't necessarily into amplifications, which is something I had mentioned as a possibility. There are harp players who have done that, you know, but she was interested in bringing the natural sound of the harp as it is. And at times I had to just simply let go and play with full sound. And yeah, no question, there were moments, maybe not so much in this recording that you just heard, but there are inevitably moments perhaps where you can't hear the harp as well or at all. And as I started mentioning, there were some composers who were interested in that, in emphasizing the contrast between the instruments. Yeah, we had to find the balance. One of the reasons most of you have not heard any of these recordings is because the studio where we recorded this, the recording engineer wasn't used to recording acoustical instruments such as the harp and trombone. He had more experience recording singers, pop singers, with some electric instruments, synthesizer, electric guitars and such. So he had a hard time balancing us. And we worked for a while trying to find the best balance mix. And when we seemed to be happy, we started recording. And when we were done recording, going back to the recording booth and starting the editing process, I realized that there was some distortion on some of the high notes. That's an interesting story, incidentally, because I started hearing this distortion, and I pointed out, and he said, "Well, this is not distortion. That's your sound. That's how you sound." And I thought to myself, "Well, I've never heard this. How is it possible?" He said, "Well, Mister, this is your sound." And shockingly, my mother was so focused in listening to her part that she didn't hear what I was talking about, and she kind of supported the recording engineer by saying, "Yeah, I think it's fine," but it wasn't fine to my ears, and I kept saying, "Yeah, but do you hear that on the high E flat or whatever? There's the distortions." Eventually, the frustrated recording engineer said, "Listen, well, let me ask you a question. When was the last time you stood in front of your bell and listen to your own playing?" Yeah, that has not happened yet. So he said, "Well, there you go. You haven't actually heard yourself the way you sound, a few feet away from yourself. This is how you sound. This is your sound. Whatever you're hearing, whatever little distortion you were hearing, that's in sound." So I was just forced to believe that this is what that there was a certain element to my sound that I wasn't aware of. And it wasn't until I think the third day of editing that my mother at some point woke up from her trance of listening to focusing on her own playing, and she suddenly jumped and she said, "Whoa, what was that?" I said, "Good morning, Mom. Yeah, yes, that's what I've been talking about for a couple of days. Yes, that." And she said, "But no, that's not you. No, you don't have that." And so at that point, there wasn't any way to save the or to change and adjust the recording in such a way that we could fix that. I tried. I sent it to many other experts in the recording industry, and no one was able to fix it. I think at this point, I'm so far removed from that experience that I'm willing to allow these recordings. You heard two excerpts from the recording to put it out there somewhere, maybe on YouTube or whatever, so people can enjoy them.
I have a question.
Yes.
That is somewhat related. So you obviously spent. We have relationships with our parents, and we get to know our parents, and they get to know us, and that relationship evolves over time as we get older and as we become adults. But I also feel like we have relationships with the people that we play with if we play with them for an extended period of time. So if you have a collaborator, an accompanist, a section within an ensemble, and you play with those people for a long period of time, or I teach at a university, and there are people that I've now taught with and worked with in several capacities. Were there times where you felt like your relationship with your mother evolved in a unique way through the collaboration of playing together? Like, you know how sometimes people will have those conversations without words that are happening. Maybe it's an argument, or maybe it's a conversation, or maybe it's sharing that private moment that almost like a joke that you can have in music, where you're with somebody and you just kind of get that feeling through that collaboration. I'm assuming that happened with your mom, and that probably shaped your relationship like with your mother in a way that would be very foreign to those of us who have not musically collaborated with our parents.
I have a very special connection with my mother and with my father, even though I haven't played with my father in the same way, music. But I always felt very close to them. And I think going back, to the story that I mentioned earlier about those Shabbat, those Saturdays where we were sitting as a family, we would take walks together, we would talk about life and whatever, because we were detached from distractions, TV and such, and my mother and myself also at some point we were I was advanced enough that like to not practice for a day and a half was we were used to that, but it wasn't it was something special. As a musician, you understand that not being able to play for a day and a half is something not many of us do usually regularly, So, I mean, I think as a family, that was one thing. I don't observe Shabbat anymore. Definitely not to the extent that I did when I was young. And I have my own children now, and I remember those days, and I value what I received from my parents, and through observing the tradition, it was very meaningful. So I am very close to my parents. I feel very fortunate that way. Both of them. I can say, and of course, I can talk about telepathy that I have with my mom, especially with my mother. But I don't know that that has anything to do with the fact that we played a lot of music together. When you play with a person on regular basis, you get to know them so well that the ensemble playing becomes very easy, or much easier with time, because you can anticipate what they're going to do, where they're going to breathe, where they're going to slow down, what is going to happen next, that kind of thing. And I certainly had that with my mother, and I had it with other accompanists later in life that I played with regularly. I was a good boy, meaning I wasn't rebellious when I grew up, and it's not like I had to take a lot of abuse, but I definitely had to be patient. It wasn't always easy, hearing mom from the kitchen yelling, "The G sharp is flat. It's yes, yeah. Your F sharp is out of tune again." These kind of things, not in an annoying way, but just as like, being my tuner, my live tuner. My mother has perfect pitch. I don't, but she has perfect pitch, so she was able to just throw these comments every now and then. Some I accepted lovingly, and it's as I grew up, as I became more and more serious in my playing, after a while it became a little sometimes uncomfortable, because you start shaping and developing your own personality in music, and your ideas, and you can't always forever do what you're told. I mean, I think something I can say about this is that also, with my students, I always recommend and push them, and what's the word? Anyway, I encourage them. I encourage my students not to be replicas, not to be copies of anyone, including myself. Develop their own personality, their own ideas, their own musical ideas, and I mean, sure, if I hear something that stylistically I don't agree with, I will definitely say something, but I encourage them not to be, what's the word? Complete copies or replicas of other players, and do exactly what other players do. Rather, develop their own ideas. And so it was at times tough. And actually, this very recording that you are hearing, or that you heard, the Bossoir and the Levinson, and maybe I'll play one more thing from there if you want. I seem to remember that this was the first time ever, and I was already, this was, let's see, I was, I think 26 or 27 years old, in my late 20s, already a member of the Philadelphia Orchestra for a few years, playing Principal Trombone here. I had already some experience musically and professionally also, I was appreciated by people, here who knew me. And there was a limit to how much I was able to accept the sometimes a little harsh criticism, or was maybe not criticism, but my mother just continued to be my mother, and she is still my mother, whom I love dearly and appreciate. But when you record a CD together with another musician, and you bring together the talent and the vision and the imagination, it's difficult to have a son and a mother, and the mother telling the son constantly what to do, because she's the mother, right? I mean, she's both a musician, and an accomplished, an incredible musician, whom I'm very thankful to, and forever I owe her everything, right? I truly owe her everything. But it was challenging, and I remember I will play this piece, if you will let me, by Tesorini, an Italian Baroque composer. And I remember her saying something, oh, well, you should do this or that. And, why don't you try and focus a little less on the low notes, because they're, you should emphasize the front of the bar. I mean, things that are true and important. However, this piece is very difficult, or for me, was very difficult. And I wanted to do my best, but I am, after all, a trombone player. There are some limitations. I mean, there's no end to how much we should strive to improve and do the impossible. But at that moment, being in the recording studio, I basically lost it for the first time. I think I said, "Mom, please stop it."
It's almost like
this is how I play.
It's like the equivalent of like the eye roll and like, "Mom." I can imagine that. I don't know if the recording engineer maybe held on to that little snippet of the time, but if that shows up in the dark web, we'll laugh out of it.
Yeah. And incidentally, to give my mother credit, she thanked me for that later, because in a way I put her in her place, and she said, all your childhood, you never rebelled, you never slammed doors, you never talked back at us, you never argued. I wasn't used to you standing firm to your opinion, and this is the first time you're doing it, and it shows me your maturity. For God's sakes, I was principal trombone of the Philadelphia Orchestra already for a few years. I mean, I wasn't 7 years old anymore, but it kind of activated a certain switch in her mind, realizing, wow, yes, I am his mom, and he's respectful and everything, but he has his own personality and his own voice, and he wants to do something his way, and I'm just going to, back off. So should I play a little bit of that?
Oh, I think that'd be great. If for no other reason, I just want to listen to see if I can figure out the moment that this was all happening. But it'd be wonderful.
I will try, and if I remember, I will point it out later. This is maybe I'll play one or two movements of the Tesorini sonata, which, needless to say, was not written for trombone originally. I'm not sure. I don't think it was written for cello either, but regardless, here it is. Thank you. That's the first movement, and yeah, I believe my little story was happening either the next movement or the last movement, which I will play, the faster movements. This is the last movement. Thank you. Yeah, it must have been during this movement, which you can hear. Yeah, it was tough. This type of playing is not. It doesn't come easily for me. I have to say, the technical fast and doing that also delicately. To match the harp was very, very hard. And I was trying so hard to be respectful of the harp and respectful of the Baroque style, and to not let the trombonistic character, remember at that time I was, this is after the Alessi, what's the word, like the stamp of Alessi, style of playing in the orchestra that I've tried at least to adapt part of it, and so I was already a very different player than I was before I moved to the US, and I was a lot more an orchestral player, and so to scale everything back to the very, very delicate player playing this sensitive technical stuff was very hard for me. And then to get you should do this here and you should do that there, and why don't you try to, Mom, I'm trying so hard, please. Yeah. Did I
Sorry.
mute myself?
No, that was
somehow?
me. I meant to unmute myself and I accidentally muted you.
I
Sorry.
get the hint.
No. I'm not trying to give you the hand or anything. I was just going to ask, so that particular piece that you said that was Tesserini, and is that the sonata in F, or was that a different one? Because I know he wrote, like, there was a cello, a flute, an oboe sonata. He wrote a bunch of sonatas, but
I believe that's the one in F, yes.
one in F. Okay, so the sonata in F.
Yeah, I got familiar with this piece thanks to Dee Stewart, who teaches in Indiana. I think he still teaches, although he's getting up there.
He's recently retired, but he's
recently retired. Okay.
Yeah, so he actually lives in Indianapolis now, but he is still pretty involved, and he's been on all the ITA Zoom calls lately, and he's still doing a lot there. Yeah.
He's a dear man, and he is a former Philadelphia Orchestra trombonist, and he how do you say? He compiled together a group of solo pieces in a book that was published years ago, and somehow I got my hands on that book. If I'm not mistaken, there's also a recording of him playing these solo compositions, and the Tesserini is one of them. I'm sure it's still available somewhere. Yeah, so I fell in love with this. Surely he didn't play it with harp, but I thought that it might work with harp, and that's how it came about that we did it, played it.
Yeah, fantastic. I think it was, yeah, I think it definitely works.
Thank you. It's a beautiful piece. It's hard as hell, but it's beautiful. Forgive my Italian.
No, not a problem at all. It's just so wonderful. I don't want to, keep you too long. I know we all have other things to do, but it's obvious that you were surrounded by just some wonderful artists growing up, and that molded and shaped, your kind of musical journey. But one of the things I think I admire even more now is that you have a graciousness about you, and the way that you are so giving of your time and your thoughts and your energy. Nowadays, information is becoming a bit of a commodity, and some people like to hold on to information, and it's just it's wonderful that you're willing to kind of share with us some very personal aspects of how you have become the artist that you've become. And I just wanted to thank you, for sharing with us, and taking the time out to do that, and your offer to, just have people freely contact you. To be honest, I have contacted several people to see if they might be interested in doing ITH sessions, and it's not a 100% response rate. Some people, they are less interested in maybe, being a part of that, but we can't thank you enough for sharing with us. It's been a wonderful opportunity to just get to know a little bit more about your philosophies of artistry, and I think everyone will be a little changed for the better from the time that we've spent. So just thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. I honestly, I don't even remember if we discussed how long this session is going to be. If we did, I don't remember, but
not a problem.
I am not in a rush anywhere. So if there are any questions, if anyone wants to talk about anything or wants me to talk about something, I'm happy. It is Shabbat, so I don't have any, and I don't have any concerts today coming up.
Nitzan, would you be willing to stop the screen share just so we can see everybody?
Yes, absolutely.
Just in case
I apologize for.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm also
How's that?
The cleanliness of your desktop on your laptop. Mine is a smattering of files, and it often makes people very uncomfortable when they see it. So,
Thank you for pointing this out. I didn't realize that we're still, looking at my Dune there. Which was yeah, please feel free to ask anything. And if not, I want to say one more thing. Let's let people. Oh, Jimmy's back in the car now. Okay, or not back in the car, but is in the car. Please be safe.
There was Nitzan, if you did have just a couple minutes, and I don't want to open up a huge can of worms or anything, but I know in our previous conversation, one of the things that kind of came up was just that concept of, and I think I mentioned as a kid, one of the things that I really was interested in and fascinated by in music and sound was that when people play an instrument so clearly, sometimes it's difficult to tell what instrument they're playing. And then, we mentioned that there's been actually a fair amount of research done, even with trained musicians, that suggests that if you kind of if you remove the beginning of the sound, like that onset, it's difficult for even trained musicians to tell what instrument, is being played, especially if the sound is, very clear and steady. And you had mentioned that, you would spend a lot of time and effort really working on and developing the way that you start sounds. And one of the things that I've always been amazed about in your playing, and not to get too, into the minutia, is it's just the way that you start sound, and I'm sure part of that was influenced by the fact that, your mom played the harp, and that I don't want to say soft in terms of volume, but maybe soft in terms of like a harshness, almost like a tactile sense of the word soft, like velvet. There's a softness to the way that you begin your sounds, and it's wonderful to hear. And I know that there's no magic pixie dust you can sprinkle on people to make them automatically do that. But if you could sum up, maybe with a sentence or two of just how you would advise people to think about how to work on something like that, because you really have a wonderful way of starting sounds.
Thank you, Jason. And yeah, we did. Thank you for reminding me and talking about this, because we did discuss that a little bit in our conversation a few days ago. So a couple of things. One, a language. The language that we grow up with. Obviously, Hebrew is somewhat different from English and from the way that English is spoken in America. Some of the sounds, the pronunciation of words are harsher. Our T, letter T, is pronounced, I believe, quite harder than the way we pronounce T in the States. Even in England, I think they pronounce T, differently and perhaps slightly more articulated than in America. So I think that contributes just by itself, and that's something that you're born into this reality. I happen to be born, in Israel and speaking Hebrew, which is a very different language, and it perhaps shaped or allowed me to develop a certain way of articulation, which is perhaps it's just different from one person to another. I mean, even in the U.S., there are different accents depending on where you're from, and you all know that. I think that it could be an advantage. Sometimes it's a disadvantage. I mean, I think that you can hear in the way that I speak that I'm not a very fast speaker. Words don't come shooting at the speed of sound or light. When I speak relatively slowly. When I hear recordings of myself speak, sometimes I'm shocked to hear myself and I want to say, come on, just say it already. That's it, why is it taking you so long to say everything? Why is it so slow? Almost everything I played for you today was slow. I'm very good with lyrical, cantabile, slow playing, where you just can sing everything. When it comes to technical, fast playing, that's a little bit less my cup of tea, so to speak. I would have always had to work harder on playing fast. That's not to say that every Israeli trombonist is like that. I grew up hearing some other friends who just naturally played fast a lot easier than me. But I think, for instance, of our extremely talented Puerto Rican principal clarinetist in the orchestra, Ricardo Morales, who is one of the world's best clarinet players, certainly orchestral best clarinetist. He's incredible, and when you hear him talk, I mean, it's like autostrada. It's like a highway. And whether it's English or, of course, Spanish, which is completely fluent, it's so fast, and such as he's playing, he can play faster than anyone I know on the clarinet. It's just mind-boggling. So again, I think that's just the language, how it's a couple of things. I mean, it's a language, just also the brain. I mean, I think people who have different brain capacity, and I'm perhaps a little on the slower end. I don't know. Something I did mention in our conversation, Jason, is the fact that by fault, by confusion or mistake, my first around 8 years of playing the trombone, I did not use single tongue at all. And I know that sounds weird to a lot of you. And in retrospect, it sounds weird to me too. But I somehow picking up the trombone and obviously getting lessons. I wasn't self-taught. I had a teacher, and a very good teacher, actually. He was extremely good at visualizing everything, explaining everything in a visual way that for a child works very well. I'm thinking of examples. He would say, you start this phrase, or you start this note like someone who approaches a very, very hot skillet or pot, and they know it's very, very hot, and they're very scared, and they touch it like that, and they have the reflex of taking back their hands because it's so hot. That's how you sound. I want you to actually grab onto this note, grab onto it without any fear, and start the note like that. This is the type of visualizations that my first teacher, Eli Aoni, was very, very good, probably still is, very, very good at. And nevertheless, I must have misunderstood his guidance as to articulation, and the most simple articulation, basic single tongue. When you start a note, you start it with a ta, right? Or a da. And I don't know where I was. I was, sleeping somehow or daydreaming or something when he explained that. And so basically I developed a strange way of starting notes, which you can say is air attack, although usually when I say to people air attack, when I ask people to try and air attack a note, they literally start with the air and then start the buzz from the air, right? So I didn't start notes like this. I started notes with a syllable of P, like pizza, like that. But there was no tongue involved whatsoever. And it was all fine as long as I played slowly, which I played a lot. As a beginner, of course, I didn't play very fast. But when I started to play pieces like the Tesserini, and I specifically remember playing a Marcello sonata, which incidentally is on YouTube. I mean, it's part of a live concert I gave about 10 years ago. In that fast movement, it's very technical, and I wasn't able easily to produce, to play these notes quickly with my personal technique of air attack, or however we want to call it. I struggled. I felt my jaw getting very, very painful and almost getting locked on me, because there was so much. I was really struggling to play it in tempo, and I remember playing it for my teacher, and he mentioned something about the tonguing, and I thought to myself, why does he keep saying tongue? I mean, I'm not using my tongue. And I brought it up in a lesson. I said, Eli, can I ask you something? I don't really know what you mean, because I don't use the tongue. And he said, well, what do you mean you don't use the tongue? I said, I don't use the tongue when I start the note. And he said, well, that's impossible. Of course you're using the tongue. I said, no, I'm not. And I tried to prove to him. I placed the tongue at the bottom of my mouth, and I said, here, I'm playing now. I'm telling you, my tongue is resting at the bottom of my mouth. I'm not using my tongue. And I played that movement, pa 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 pam 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 pam, pa pa pam 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 pim, pa pa pam pam pa 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 pa, only in pa 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 pa. And he looked at me up close and got very close to my embouchure and said, that's impossible. You must be using your tongue, even a little bit. I said, no. So he said, well, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I think you figured out a certain way, maybe using it. He didn't have an answer. And I remember then going to the bass trombonist of the Israel Philharmonic and taking a lesson with him, Michael Davis, in Tel Aviv. And I raised that question. I said, Micha, I need to ask you something. You hear this phrase, I'm not using any tongue. What should I do? I'm struggling. And he said, what, really? I mean, just play a scale and try to use your tongue. Try to articulate using the tongue as in the fronts of notes. And he said, are you able to do it? I said, yes, but it sounds terrible. And I did. And he said, well, yeah, okay, you can do it. So here's what I think you should do. He said, you're joining the army soon. I was already a year or so before my army service. Imagine that. I started playing when I was 9 years old. And this was when I was about 17. I finally came to the realization that this is what I was doing, and that was perhaps very different from what every other trombonist I knew was playing. It was terrifying, actually. And he said, well, you're joining the army, you're going to play a lot of marches on the field, and just practice your tonguing playing marches. No one will care about the sound and the quality. It's just do that. And actually, that's what I did. I played a lot of euphonium in the marching band, and I used tongue articulation. Now, so let's take a little break and go back to your compliment, Jason. I definitely take it as a compliment that there's something special in the way I articulate. I think that, so fast forward to today, I definitely do use single tongue. However, I have a couple of really cool brushes that I used when I paint, right? I don't use the same brush. I use different brushes. And that allows for a different effect on the canvas. I do use very, very soft, close to air attack articulation at times. And for instance, back to the Brahms chorale, for instance, in the Brahms Fourth Symphony, I mean, that G sharp, I basically air attack it because it's so soft, it's so gentle, it's so delicate, it's such a magical moment in the symphony, and I almost air attack it. I'm able to do this because of my crippled beginning of first years, where I didn't know what I was doing, but I developed a certain technique. And I very highly recommend, incidentally, for all of you, all of us, to be able to do that. It's you know, there's a reason I use the comparison, or I compare playing the notes and articulating to being a painter and using different colors, different paint, and different brushes. Because it's very cool. And when you're able to do that, and it doesn't matter if you play jazz or you play classical or whatever, if you have various tools to work with, various brushes to paint with, you can create very, very cool effects. And I definitely use this effect from time to time. I will also add here and throw at you one more thing is I have known, and I come across on regular basis players who have, I think it's called Valsava maneuver, or basically hesitation in their articulation, starting notes, especially at the beginning of a phrase or beginning of a movement. People being stuck, not being able to start notes easily. I've had many students who've suffered to certain degrees of that. And sometimes it just happens at a certain point. It's not something that you deal with from early on in your playing. I mean, it's just because of tension, because of various reasons, it happens, and then you struggle. So the best remedy for this issue is learning how to play with air attack, or how to start notes with air attack. I recommend not only working on, as I mentioned earlier, the typical air attack, at least in America, when people say air attack, they think about starting the note, with air, and then gradually starting the buzz, and rather working on what I did, a different syllable, rather than using T or D, using a syllable like P or F, and starting the buzz that way. So, but without the tongue. So starting the buzz at the moment of contact, and not having the tongue be there to create any kind of tension, any kind of hesitation that might be created due to the tension. So yeah, this is something that definitely was part of what you were talking about, Jason, and the ability to have different color in the fronts of notes, because I pick and choose. If I want a hard articulation, I know how to do it, and if I want a very soft, and I did that a lot when I played. And unfortunately, I speak in past tense because I don't get to play with my mother quite as often. She's 75 years old. She lives in Israel. I live here. It's hard, although it does happen from time to time. But back when we played a lot together, I used that technique a lot. using starting notes very, very softly with that technique.
I think that's fascinating. And thank you for sharing it. I also find it humorous that there's a possibility that, you know, young 18-year-old Nitzan was hammering away on a euphonium in some military band, and there's somebody next to you thinking, "Who's this guy? What's going on over here?" And you know, little did they know that you would be the principal trombone of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and the you know the
Trust me, they had the cymbals behind us going like this, you know, on the bass drum, you know, and no one thought like, what is this guy doing with this harsh articulation?
Right. It probably didn't come up on the radar, but
I have to add, if I may, one last story, because it is very, very interesting. When I was a member of the New York Philharmonic, so this is about the years 94, I believe, 1994. And I'm starting to work on the audition list for Philadelphia, Principal Trombone, Philadelphia Orchestra. Solo piece is Creston, Paul Creston Fantasy, and a bunch of difficult excerpts. And suddenly creeps in a weird double buzz into my playing. I had never had that before. This was, you know, I was 24 years old, almost 25 almost. So already playing a good number of years and having the experience of playing with my mother, blah, 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 all of that. Double buzz. So starting the solo of Mahler 3, for instance, which I'm sure you all know, starts on a middle A, nice, comfortable forte. I start the note, and there's a terrible double buzz effect on that A, and I get very, very confused and slightly worried. And I try it again, and it happens again. And okay, so fast forward a little bit. You know, I got very angry and frustrated. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what happened suddenly. And I realized after a few days that this is creeping into other notes, mainly around that range. So the B flat in first position, all the way down to G flat in fifth, around that air column. Every time I play a G and I start a G or G flat, A, I get a double buzz effect, and it's just not that pure front that we were just talking about. And I freaked out. I said, what's happening here? I got very angry and didn't know what to do. And I went to Joe, who was at that time not only my mentor in New York, but my colleague. And I said, Joe, listen to this. I don't know what's happening. I get this double buzz, and so he said, well, yeah, I guess if this was me, I mean, if I were you, I would just get in a room and blow the shit out of these notes. And I said, well, I've done that. I've done that out of frustration at 10, 11 o'clock at night, midnight, you know, practicing for the Philadelphia Orchestra audition after concerts with the New York Philharmonic, and being frustrated late at night and just blasting through these notes, trying to fix the problem that did not fix the problem. I went and talked to Phil Myers, who at the time was the principal horn player, legendary horn player of the New York Philharmonic. I asked him, I said, what do you think? And he said, well, let me ask you something. When you came to this country, which was just a year and a half before, did you play a different equipment? And I said, well, yeah, I played a Bach trombone and a 5G mouthpiece. That's what I came from Israel with. And at that point, I switched to Edwards, which was what I was recommended by Joe at the time, and a larger mouthpiece. I had a bass trombone friend, Israeli friend in New York, and he gave me a 3G mouthpiece, a Bach 3G mouthpiece. Here we are. We finally are getting to the point where we're talking mouthpieces. He gave me three. I didn't even have necessarily the money or the time to invest in really looking into different mouthpieces. And so I just played a 3G, and that's a pretty big change, rim wise, but that's what I play. And he said, well, you see, I mean, why don't you go back to the equipment you felt so comfortable with before you started to work on the audition for New York and now Philly, and actually I had tried that. I had tried going back to the smaller mouthpiece, if anything, just out of curiosity to see what happens. And that effect, that the double buzz effect was already present enough that it was happening also when I switched back to the old mouthpiece. And so I was desperate. I'll tell you, there wasn't any doctor I could go to and say, help me. I don't know what to do. I felt like I would just simply have to quit playing altogether if I can't resolve this, if I can't fix this problem, because it was awful. And a note like this A in the beginning of Mahler, which is just one of the most glorious, dramatic notes in a trombone solo in the orchestral repertoire. I mean, it's earth-shattering. It's beautiful. It's grandiose, all in one note, and to have that note be not clear at the beginning, and then it would the double buzz would creep in also. It's like what I'm all about playing with the purest tone. What is happening, and no one was able to help. And so miraculously, first of all, somehow I was able to win the audition in Philly. I went through a rigorous process of trial and error, trying whatever I could to improve the situation. I would sit for hours and try all kinds of ways to fix this. And this goes back now to talking about this weird way of articulation. When I started to play the trombone, because for about 8 years, as I said, I played that with that way of starting fronts of notes, and then just like that, I started articulating one day. Right, I'm just marching away with my euphonium in Israel and with the military band, and I'm articulating notes, and I'm just hitting with my tongue and trying to make that these fronts be clear and comfortable, because it was a new sensation, and that's it. But I didn't investigate, and I didn't get the proper instruction to figure out what exactly I need to do. And what I realized few years later, about 7 years later, was that when I was hitting with my tongue and articulating and starting notes, my tongue was actually between my teeth and sticking out of between my lips. So there was a like that. Now, when we play in the low register, when you play low notes, certainly pedal notes and etc., sometimes I still do that to this day. But what I realized with time and trial and error, trial again and again and again, is basically what I had to do to stop the double buzz is I had to learn to place my tongue inside, to hit with my tongue inside my mouth, behind my front upper teeth. It was, again, it's just something that I discovered that was a key element in stopping the double buzz is articulating differently, is thinking of the corners of my mouth when I play everything, especially in that what I called the red zone, which was that air column starting B flat to G flat. Oh, look at this puppy that Martin has. Oh, great. He wants to learn about tonguing, right?
He's a lot quieter these days. He's nearly deaf and blind, but he comes to bug me whenever I'm on a Zoom call. So
cute.
I get even
So
with him.
cute.
I show him the camera.
So cute. So I have figured out 3 elements that help me solve that problem. One was hitting with my tongue up against my upper front teeth in the back, of course. Thinking about the corners of my mouth, and working with my diaphragm and abdominal core. These 3 elements together ended up being the formula to stop the double buzz. And to this day, I mean, it's second nature already, but to this day, at times if I come across a player who struggles like I did, I remind them these 3 elements, these 3 basic fundamental elements that helped me stop this weird phenomenon. And it goes back to language and to how I started playing the trombone and articulating in my own weird way. And it was magical. It allowed me to do some amazing things to this day. However, it did bring along with it also some weird side effect that at some point snuck into my playing, and took about 2 years to completely figure out. 2 very frustrating years. I mean, during those years, I won this job here, which was a miracle, and I was very fortunate. But I had to continue and to investigate and dig deep and analyze everything I was doing until I figured out what to do to stop it from happening.
Yeah, when you are going through issues, you learn so much more, and you're fortunate you learned it probably at an earlier age, because you hit that at the age of 40, and all of a sudden, there's focal dystonia and all these other things that creep into people's playing, and you can pretty well be done. I've had
That's right.
friends that have had to stop playing.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quickly that it seems like a lot of people, I don't want to use the word weakness, but for lack of a better word, I will use the word weakness. Let's say there is a weakness in what we do in some way. I feel like a lot of people that become, quite successful are people that have taken whatever that weakness was and turned it into one of their greatest strengths through, work, trial and error, creativity, resilience, all of the things. But it used to be ironic to me, but now it just seems fitting that, you are this, in my opinion, one of the great enunciators of our instrument. And it is a testament to the fact that, I think you went through quite a bit of struggle in different ways, and your path was very unique in how you developed that. And then lo and behold, here you are. And now I think even if in your mind you still have to really think about it and work on it, it just seems to be such a source of strength for the way that you play and the way that you approach the instrument.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Thank you for saying that. It's important for me to be very open about these things. I feel like in our field there are certain taboos. The fact that here I was 24 years old and a member of a professional orchestra and not being able to get any help to solve a problem like that. And not because no one wanted to help me. I couldn't find anyone to talk to about this. I know that some people think, oh yeah, this guy, he won New York Philharmonic when he was 23 years old. And I mean, he never had to deal with any issue. Wrong, very wrong, very wrong. I had to deal with issues. I had struggles, and that makes you who you are as a player, as a musician, as a human being.
I find, as well as I've run, out of all the teachers and things, I've only played for about 53 years. And there are maybe 3 people that play trombone that can actually talk about embouchure issues. The rest of them will tell you to blow more air, will tell you to do a whole bunch of stuff, which is really just indicating they never really knew how they became as successful as they did. Yes, they're successful. Christian Lindbergh has this thing of, why would you bother mouthpiece buzzing? And he goes into a mouthpiece and says, see, it doesn't work for me. You don't need to do that. Like,
I know.
All right, so you play wonderfully, but I would be wasting money to try to take a lesson from you about the physical aspects of playing trombone. And I would learn any amount of his musical interpretation. I actually visited the town where he was a choral director up in northern Sweden. He wasn't there, but I went to the town. I was working.
Nice, very nice.
Funny.
Well,
yeah, to struggle through is the things that we all face. I mean, there's just so many things that can go wrong on any given day. And what do you do to fix these things? And when there isn't, when there's people around just telling you stuff because they don't know. There's a guy in Maryland that named Doug Elliott that sells mouthpieces that is reported to be a good embouchure guy. And there's David Wilkin, I believe, is another one. And I've got 2 people up here in Toronto I can go to, a trumpet player that studied with Jerome Callett. He's struggled through and actually ended up with a tongue-controlled embouchure. And there are symphony players, wow, including tuba players, that can do that. But that's his way of doing it. He says, I have a compression embouchure because I study with a guy named Alistair Kay currently, and he's the guy that designs trombones for Yamaha, and he's a hell of a player. Hayden, you might know him by the way you're nodding there. but he can do amazing things. But he's a jazzer. But he for me, his message resonates with me.
Today we have the one of the advantages of the internet is for us to do this session, first of all, but also it's an incredible source of information. So you just type something, you Google something, and most likely you will find some information from someone else around the world who is dealing with similar issues, and you can get help. It's amazing to think that not too long ago, I mean, the story that I shared with you, I mean, when I was 24 years old, it's about 25 years ago, 26 years ago, the internet wasn't there to help me. I wasn't able to Google anything.
My second monitor is every piece of music you've talked about got from IMSLP, and I've looked them up. I shared one link there, which you don't have to click on. You can find it yourself because I showed you how to do it. But that was the Cello Sonata by Tesserini.
Right.
I've been following along with Mahler 3. You said Schumann. I had to bring that up again, et cetera, et cetera.
Martin, I would be careful going to trumpet players for embouchure advice.
You have to. But he's never tried to change it. It's just really, it's an interesting conversation. And you're right, so you have to. Everything comes with the same guarantee, right?
with trumpet players, it's always like, oh my gosh, check this out. We got to change your embouchure.
No, I had a number of friends that threatened that or told me that this guy would do the same thing, but we get together and play duets. I fortunately play brass band, so I can read treble clef, so we play trumpet duets, and we've gotten quite a library of things we can play. And I was playing a bass trumpet for a while, but I gave up. Well, I'm playing that less because I'd rather just play my trusty 508. But yes, you're right. You have to be careful where you get your advice from. And
I have a quick question for you, Nitzan, if I may.
Yes. So
when are you planning to record another CD for all of us?
thank you for the question, and I take it as a compliment to get this question. I think first of all, I need to compile a few recordings, some you've heard today, and simply release them. I haven't decided yet if I just simply put it on YouTube and get it over with. I have some solos with orchestra that I've recorded a while back. You see, I have been so incredibly critical with myself that, for instance, that whole issue of the distortion, which you might not even heard in the clips that I played for you, because I don't think they were very present in those particular movements or pieces. But I did not release these recordings because I wasn't happy with them. I think I'm finally I'm getting old enough to accept myself, first of all, and to accept the imperfections, and to be okay with myself, and allow some of these recordings to be out there and available for people. So I actually have recorded some things which I promise I will release soon. Thank you for bugging me about it, because I need to do that.
Yeah, sorry. I remember you told me the story with your CD, that it was sitting on your shelf when I played for you, and you told me the story that it was sitting until someone heard it and told you, you got to release that. So,
Yeah.
you got to release everything because it's absolutely, and you've been very honest, and I'll take just 10 seconds to say that. But to me, you're probably the only trombonist I ever heard who I never hear the trombone. I always hear the music, and it's so incredibly powerful, and it's so incredibly inspirational that it's absolutely very, very unique. So Nitzan, I think anything you play will have such a strong influence on all of us. So.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. I need that. Because years of self-beating, and not being happy with this or that, and just being in a culture of that is impressed by perfection, or at least that was how I conceived things, and wanting to reach perfection and never really being able to. But of course, I as I get older, I realize more and more that that it's not about that. Obviously, I knew it, but I'm actually starting finally to get convinced that it's true. I don't just say it, but I actually even deeply agree with that. And I hear some of the recordings that I did a while ago, and I think, wow, they're not as bad as I thought they were. And even if there's a scratch here and a little cack there, it's okay. People will be forgiving. So thank you very much for encouraging me. I promise I will do that soon. And then hopefully when the pandemic is over and I get back to top shape, and on concerts and all of these things resume, I hopefully will work on something in addition.
Thank you, Nitzan.
Thank you.
You make a good point. It's really about the music. It's not about being note perfect sometimes.
You know, this one thing about the internet also is that you find so many things on YouTube, and YouTube is just one platform, right? But I mean, there's so much information, there's so much music, there's so many recordings. You hear everything. The issue is that, you know, once you post something, it's there. It's there. And, you know, and the difference between hearing a live concert and some of the recordings that I'm considering sharing are from a live concert. And, you know, what you give in a live concert, I mean, personally, I mean, how I feel about it is I just, you know, here I am. That's what I am. I just give everything. I open my heart to all of you and give you everything I can. And that sometimes, as a result, you know, maybe that's just an excuse, but, you know, you end up maybe scratching a note here or there. And while it's more than fine in a live concert and acceptable and forgivable, as a performer, it has been more difficult for me to accept that I will put something out there which will be there forever with those blemishes or imperfections. It's hard because we live in a world where everyone is reaching and dreaming and hoping for perfection, and some people are not impressed with anything that's less than perfect. So, okay, I said what I had to say, and thank you again for the encouragement. And I promise you, I give you my word that I will. There'll be more out there.
Jason, if I may, really quick. Sorry, 5 seconds only. You know, when and I feel weird saying this because this is not my place, but when the music is so solid, I think it transcends any type of little imperfection. And you know, listening to you, that's all it is. It's just music, and I don't even know that often I can't hear the trombone at all. You know, I don't think that it's really weird to explain, maybe, but there's no trombone in there. It's just music, you know. And I think that, I, you know, no surprise that any audition you ever took, you won, because when you play for a panel of musicians, they just hear the music, and that's so rare. I think, you know, I strive for that every day, and I feel I never get it. You know, it's so hard.
Wow.
So, anyway,
If you're aware of that, and if you think of that, that's what's important. I'm sure. Thank you so much.
And well, and Nitzan, if you do end up publishing some of these tracks on YouTube, I can guarantee you'll get at least 20 likes from the members of the International Trombone Hang. So I just wanted to thank you so much again. It's been wonderful to get a chance to just speak with you and hear your insight and playing some of these recordings for us that were just wonderful. Thank you so much for the time, Nitzan. Really can't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Please stay safe so we can see each other soon enough. And again, don't hesitate reaching out if you need to for any other continuous conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
Hope to see you at the future hangs.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.